big brick things that they used to carry around, but you know, if a cell phone would go off in a meeting, it would be literally, it'd be a $500 fine. You know, some of the guys would rush into meetings late, you know, they'd forget about to silence their phone or to put their phone in their locker. And it was typically the same guys all the time, so we knew who they were. And we'd sit there and we would call their number. Because all that money at the end of the year, the pool monies went towards, you know, a big party, a big bash for everybody afterwards. So, hey, all's fair in love and war, right? I was just thinking about the Super Bowl. Super Bowl last week, phenomenal game, great game. Unfortunately, the Cowboys weren't there, but this is the first time, and I don't know why, I typically don't wear a Super Bowl ring. It's just the way it is. I don't like the big bling, but I pulled this ring out. Of the three that I have, this was the first one, 20 years ago, guys and ladies and men. That just makes me feel old. I say 20 years. I'm an official old fogey now as far as the Cowboys are concerned, but you know, that's the thing about the Cowboys. The brand, the Dallas Cowboys, are probably the most recognized brand in professional sports, you know, in this country and most certainly around the world. And I'd like to share a story that, you know, how polarizing that brand really is. This past year, I had the privilege of representing the Dallas Cowboys to announce their draft picks in New York City at Radio City Music Hall. They typically pick one alumni from each team that goes out for the second, third round draft picks, across the podium and announce who their respective team is going to draft. They flew us out, put us up in a nice hotel there right there in Times Square, and we got a chance to watch the activities on Thursday night, which where they announced the first round draft picks. When it came to the time for the Dallas Cowboys' turn, you know, I wasn't announced because I was on the second, third round draft picks. When they came to announce the Cowboys ended up deferring their draft picks to the second and ultimately the third round. Well, even when they did that, the majority of the fans that were in the audience there were Redskin fans, were Giant fans, were Jet fans, were Philadelphia Eagle fans. So needless to say, they disliked the Cowboys, right? Well, they announced it, everything you just hear was just a plethora of boo, you suck, boo. So here I'm sitting there watching this on TV thinking, what are they going to do when I get up there tomorrow? They introduced me to go up there. Well, I was a little bit nervous and ended up getting pushed to the second round to the third round. I was one of the last guys to get up and go. There's still a huge crowd in there, and they made the introduction. So what ended up today is like Chad Hennings, Dallas, you know, defensive lineman, but they also had a former Air Force veteran, Gulf War veteran. And even in New York, they cannot boo a veteran. It's the polite, you know, kind of golf clap. I go there and I'm saying, you know what, I can't let these folks, you know, hook that easy. So when I went up to make the announcement, I kind of sat there and I said, you know, for the 71st pick of the 2012 draft, and I paused for a second. I looked up there and I said, America's team. The Dallas Cowboys, and then it just erupted. That's it. But it was a lot of fun, you know, even post-career and during the career to be able to play for the Cowboys. And, you know, it took a lot of commitment. It certainly takes more commitment now, I think, to be a fan of the Cowboys than it did. But today, what I want to talk with you today, you know, I turned 40 several years ago, and I took kind of an assessment of my life at that point in time, and I asked myself a simple question as to why. Why did I do what I did? You know, up to that point, I was able to pretty much accomplish everything I put my hand to. I was a star athlete, student in high school. I was a unanimous All-American, two-time academic All-American in college, outward trophy winner. I was a combat veteran, fighter pilot through 45 missions in northern Iraq. I was a three-time Super Bowl champion with the Dallas Cowboys. I was a successful businessman in the Dallas area. You know, but it was a major trial in my life with the help of my son that made me realize that a lot of the things that I had accomplished were just that, things. You know, a lot of the priorities that I started my adult life pursuing, the things that I thought were important for myself, you know, for my wife, my kids, my career, you know, they weren't lasting, they were temporal. You know, life has a funny way of taking turns, and I was really looking at the filter in which I viewed all my experiences through. What was my perception of reality? It was during this time of reflection, and I think even prior to that, I like to read a lot of historical works, and I like to read a lot of biographies, particularly on individuals, leaders, political leaders, military leaders, theological leaders. One book in particular that had an impact on me when it first came out was a book on Dietrich Bonhoeffer called Bonhoeffer, Pastor, Prophet, Martyr, Schlock. For those of you who don't know about Bonhoeffer, Bonhoeffer was a Lutheran pastor in the early 20th century in Germany. He was well known for his stance against the racial laws, the discriminatory racial laws against the Nuremberg race laws, and against other social injustices that the German National Socialist Party, Hitler's party, was doing, as well as the racial inequities within the actual state-sanctioned religion of Germany itself. You know, he was actually indirectly even involved in one of the many assassination plots against Adolf Hitler. And it was because of that where he was eventually martyred and hanged at Flossenburg concentration camp, 6 days before that camp was liberated towards the end of World War II. As I looked at that, and I looked at not only who he was as a person, his internal fortitude, what drove him to stand up against those things, I also looked at the nation of Germany, which was very similar to ours culturally, economically, socially, and how could something like that happen in their country where the decisions that their leadership made took us down the road through World War II, and could that happen again today? Could these events happen today if we become complacent, or we don't become passionate about protecting the traditions and some of the cultural aspects, that we all grew up with in our country today? It kind of reminded me of an old saying that we used to say when I was flying jets in the Air Force. And Joe, you can appreciate this: don't bust your ROE. Don't bust your rules of engagement. These rules were rules that were there for our safety. Some of them were written, some of them were unwritten rules. And typically they talk about these rules being written in blood, because somebody at some point in time busted one of these ROE and it cost them their life. And that's when I think the light bulb actually kind of went on for me. I've been hit in the head so many times over a 19-year career playing football. It sometimes takes a while for certain things to sink in, but there are certain ROE or universal truths in our culture, in our world today, that if you bust them, you're going to get hurt. And really, that's what prompted me to write my latest book, Rules of Engagement, was basically upon that concept. What are the rules of engagement? What are the things that I've learned from my experiences, some of these lessons that I can pass on to my kids as well as to others, where they can learn and we can start a dialogue about what are these universal truths that we do live under. Another book that had a significant impact on me at that same time was a book, is basically the biography of Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. Again, I'd highly recommend you guys, if you ever have the opportunity to read these books, because they're very enlightening about the aspects of human nature and the internal mechanisms of man. But Viktor Frankl was a Viennese Austrian psychiatrist who also spent time in the concentration camps in Auschwitz, in Poland, as well as in Germany. And he had everything taken from him. All his material possessions, his family, his wife, his mother and father were all killed in the concentration camps. And he was basically brought to the bare essence of his humanity. All he had was the tattoo written on inside his book. It was during this time of his time in the concentration camps that he made some observations as to why some people lived and others died. He often found that those that lived had a purpose or a cause to live for. They had a reason to live. And many times that purpose or the cause was a person or an inner emotional angst to want to do that. But he noticed that why some people also died, and many times those people that died were healthier, lived in better conditions than those that lived. And he determined that the reason why those folks that died was that they lost their why. They lost their purpose. It goes along with what Nietzsche says, that he who has a why to live for can bear almost any how. And after reading works like this, I really began to internally look at myself and ask myself that question again: why? Why? Or more specifically, what is the legacy through my actions and the things that I do, my interactions with people, things that I say, how is it impacting the story that I'm writing? And each and every one of us are writing a unique story. Because you see, your legacy, it's not simply about riches or material things. Those things can be gone tomorrow. There's a lot of folks that have experienced this latest economic downturn. But your wealth can be gone tomorrow. But the things that last throughout all generations are your vision. I'll get into that here in a second. And your character. To me, that's true wealth. Character is forged through the decisions that you make. And that's the true legacy that you pass on to your kids. That's what transcends generations. As the proverb says, that a good name is better than silver or gold. And yet we live in a time when people aren't interested in crafting a vision, let alone living a life of character. It seems like everything today in our culture is situational. What's true today is not necessarily true tomorrow. You define what your truth is according to what you want it to be and how it affects your life. But you know, thank God we still live in a country where we have the freedoms, predominantly the freedom of choice. Where we can choose to follow the path of our own selfish indulgence, or we can choose to serve others. We can choose to be leaders in our families and in our communities, or we can choose to pitch on the fight. It's all about choice. You know, I believe every individual wants to live a life of significance. We all want our lives to count. We want to look back and say, you know, we made a difference. We are part of something greater than self. Some people choose to fill that inner need of things of material gain, money, fame, social status. But some people choose to answer the call of service. You know, it's a biblical principle that the greatest of you needs to be a servant first. You know, people have often called me a hero or a role model. They see what I did on the football field. You know, hey, I have a Super Bowl ring. You know, I played a sport in front of millions of people. I won 3 Super Bowls. Rubbed elbows with some phenomenal athletes and celebrities, etc. But that doesn't give anybody the credence to be a hero or a role model just because of your celebrity status. Look at the front page of any periodical and proof case in point. Lance Armstrong particularly comes to mind. But in my opinion, a true hero is one who exemplifies a life of character and service. You know, again, I played on 3 Super Bowl championship teams and been able to, very blessed to have been able to make a very comfortable living. You know, I know Troy Aikman, I know Evan Smith, you know, I played with Michael Irvin, you know, I know all these guys. But that doesn't rank in my life as the thing I look back on as being the most significant. I look back at my time as a young lieutenant in a fighter squadron, flying with combat humanitarian missions as a point where I learned about what is the essence of true service. You know, it was the essence of either flying a combat or a training mission. It was the camaraderie, it was the esprit de corps, it was the sense of purpose. You know, truly playing in the Super Bowl paled in the essence of this. Look at, you know, to prove my case in point, I can remember when I came to the Cowboys, and I was really intrigued that the guys in the team were more interested in my time of flying jets than they were anything else. They wanted to know what it was like. They wanted to hear the stories of, you know, there I was. They wanted to know what it was truly like to put it on the line and not use that metaphor in relation to the fields of friendly strife and the gridiron. Because bottom line is, deep down, we all want to be tested. We all want to know if we have what it takes, quote unquote, the right stuff. Because again, some people, when faced with the opportunity to serve, follow through, while others choose to wait on the sidelines, you know, and never get in the game. And that's my challenge for each and every one of you here today. Are you in the game? Are you in the game? What's the legacy that you're writing? The story that you're writing for your subsequent generation, your kids, your grandkids, for your friends, those people, your peers, your business associates. And to me, fulfilling that aspect of legacy, it's all about commitment. And I want to share to you just some ideas that I have on the concept of how to be committed as an individual, as a member of a team, some leadership commitment principles, and finally, what I've determined, how do you define success in that aspect? We all have to be committed to the path before us. I believe your commitment and your commitment level are more than just words. It's your thoughts, it's your actions, it's what defines you as an individual. Again, it's your character. I believe commitment is about having a plan and working that plan. It's about what do you do when things don't necessarily go as planned? What do you do when you hit those proverbial crossroads in life? And I think also, just as important is, what do you do when you've accomplished what you set out to do? When you achieve success, how do you stay on top? which I think is even more challenging than climbing that ladder to get to that level of success. And I found that if you plan everything in your life to go smoothly, where you're never going to have to navigate those times of trial and turmoil, you're doomed to fail. You must be prepared for all contingencies and take those calculated risks. And truly, with living a full life, that means going through all the ups and downs and pains and joys that come with living that full life. So for me personally, what was commitment to me? Commitment to me was wanting to fly jets bad enough. Even after I was told by the wing flight surgeon at Shepherd Air Force Base, where I attended undergraduate pilot training, that the Air Force had to actually go back and check the design specifications of the T-37 ejection seat, because they weren't sure if I'd clear the tail if I ever had to punch out of the aircraft. That means, as a quick sidebar, my instructor pilots would brief that if we were in a controlled ejection situation, which is an oxymoron in and of itself, controlled crash, we roll that aircraft inverted upside down and allow that extra-G, the Earth's gravitational force, to pull me on the plane. So think about that next time you ever see a car wreck and that presence of thought, okay, I'm about ready to die here. I got to roll upside down before I pull the handles. It ain't gonna happen. Commitment to me was being informed by an Air Force study that the life expectancy of an A-10 pilot, the jet that I flew on active duty, the life expectancy of an A-10 pilot during the Cold War scenario in Central Europe, if the Soviets and the East Germans would cross from East Germany to West Germany along the Fulda Gap, that my life expectancy would have been 15 minutes. That's how hot that forward edge of the battle area would have been. Commitment to me was flying on the wing of my flight leg, either in Western Europe or the northern part of Iraq, where you have just 3 feet of wingtip clearance. And many times with the weather like it's been early mornings here, where you're so socked in, all you can see is a flashing light on his wingtip, top and bottom of his fuselage, as well as in front of his nose cone. Trusting your flight leg, not only to navigate the weather, but to navigate the terrain among this northern Iraq, so that you can get into your target area to accomplish your mission. Commitment to me, for all of us proud Texans, it's going through an NFL training camp either in Austin or Wichita Falls, Texas. You know, I can remember many times where it's 105 degrees in the shade by about 9:30 in the morning. Going through a 2-hour practice, I would literally lose up to 14, 15 pounds of water weight during that time. And you can feel the cramps coming on. So you go into the training, you lay on the training table, they stick IVs in your arm, and you're sitting there as the fluids are dripping in to stop not only the physiological effects of the cramps, but you're fighting the mental effects, knowing that you have to go back out there in 3 to 4 more hours and do it again. Not just for 3 to 4 days or 5 to 6 days, but for 5 to 6 weeks. That's the length of an NFL training camp. At least that's what it was back then. Lest we digress here. My final example of commitment was to reach out to tackle a 240-pound running back against the dreaded Washington Redskins on a Monday Night Football game. As I'm tackling that running back, I got a 320-pound offensive guard tackling me from behind. As we fall into that great heap of human flesh, my right arm is stuck above my head. And like all good defensive football players, my teammates, they want to get that assisted tackle, right? So everybody piles onto the pile. So with that extra about 1,600 pounds of body mass on top of me, I could feel my lat muscle tear. And it tore to the point where I couldn't raise my arm above parallel, but I couldn't pull myself out of the game because there's nobody behind me at my position to play that position. That's how I try to exemplify commitment in my life. And I firmly believe, as you can tell, I'm a big believer in universal truth. So whether it's, as a fighter pilot flying A-10s, as a professional athlete, I think even more so as a husband and a father, I've learned a few of these lessons which have helped me when I've come to those proverbial crossroads in life, to navigate through to make that decision. There have been times where I've questioned whether my commitment was warranted. But these principles have helped me to guide me, and I firmly believe whether it's raising your kids, negotiating the next deal, flying a mission in combat, or circumventing an offensive line in the NFL, these principles are universal. To exemplify commitment as an individual, I believe there are 5 steps. First step is a step of vision. What's your goal? What are your prize? Not only that, but who are you in relationship to that goal, that prize, what you're trying to accomplish? Another proverb states is where there is no vision, the people perish. Your vision or goal defines the energies that the rest of your energies are based upon. If you have a vaguely defined vision, your chance of success is equally skewed. Most likely you're not going to accomplish that. But if your vision is clearly defined, your vision is clearly defined as to who you are in relation to your relationships, personal and professional, your chances creating success or achieving a vision that much greater. But your vision is not something you got to remember. It's not based on emotion or whim. Your vision is set in stone. You don't change who you are internally based upon the direction that the winds blow. When adversity comes, that's what your character is tested. So there will be times when your emotional circumstances may cause you to rethink, hey, who I am and what I'm trying to accomplish, is that where I need to be? But always remember, it takes commitment. There's a story told about a young man who his goal, his prize, his vision for himself was that he wanted to become famously wealthy. He just wanted to be rich. One day he went up to a very wealthy elderly gentleman. He said, "Sir, how did you make your money?" Well, that wealthy elderly gentleman kind of sat back, stroked his chin. He said, "Well, son, it was 1932. It was in the depths of the Great Depression." He said, "I was down to my last nickel. I took that nickel and I bought an apple. And I spent the whole day polishing that apple till it just shone like the sun." He said, "At the end of the day, I sold that apple for 10 cents. Great capitalistic society in which we live, right?" He said, "I took that 10 cents the next day and I bought 2 apples. Same process, polished them all day long. At the end of the day, I sold them for 20 cents. He said, "I kept that whole process up for a whole month. And at the end of that month, I accumulated a fortune of $1.37. Then my wife's father died and left me $2 million. The reason I share that story with you is that if your vision, if your primary purpose, goal, aim in life is to be rich or to be wealthy, it's not a lasting vision. Your vision or goal should be that it's outside your comfort zone. Colin Wilson, in his book Religion in the Road, put it best when he said, "The visionary disciplines himself to see the world always as if he had just seen it for the first time." That speaks of creativity. That speaks of passion, does it not? When I was, prior to graduating, as I alluded to before, from the Air Force Academy, I was drafted by the Dallas Cowboys. But at a minimum of a 5-year military commitment, but I chose to up that commitment to 8 years because I wanted to fly jets. So technically, playing for the Cowboys was never an option for me. And I can remember many times where I've got my G suit on, my pugs carrying it in, my flight helmet, getting ready to step out of the ops desk to go hop in the crew van to go out to the flight, get into that T-37 aircraft, and I'd get a phone call, bring, be somebody from the Dallas media. There's many people associated with any media outlets. But I get several requests for interviews at this time of people wanting to know, hey, when are you going to get out of your commitment? When are you going to come play for the Cowboys? And this was back when the Cowboys were winning 15. And you talk about a distraction. Here it was, my goal, my prize, my vision for myself, that I wanted to become the best fighter pilot that I could be. And from a character standpoint, yeah, I had this dangling money out here, ability to come make a lot of money. Or was it my sense of commitment, sense of honor, integrity, that I was going to fulfill the commitment that I signed on when I went to the Air Force Academy? It's not an easy task. Believe me, I struggled with it. But I'm glad that I chose the path that I did, because it set up, was one of the best lessons that I learned for later in my professional life, that you got to stay focused on your goal, as well as who you are as an individual. Because as everything in life is based on relationships, and if you can't trust your wingmen, or those that you do business with, what do you have? Vision. Next stage is to evaluate. Blaise Pascal is quoted as saying that one must know oneself. If this does not serve to discover truth, it at least serves as a rule of life, and there's nothing better. Okay, so what's that mean? Personal inventory. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? You build on both. Get your strengths stronger, but you limit your weaknesses. But it's during this evaluation process that you got to be honest with yourself, or you're only going to prolong the inevitable. Now, I'm sure that each and every one of you through your businesses at some point in time, regularly or annually at least, that you get feedback on how well you're doing at your position. Have you ever done an introspective survey or poll about how you're doing personally, through your family, through your relationships? I want to encourage you to just do this exercise. When you go home, ask your spouse or ask a good friend, how do you see me? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? I did this with my wife once. I was actually shocked. Okay, I think we have this perception of reality as to who we are and what our strengths and our weaknesses are. And I think I'm a pretty good guy. She came back in a loving manner. What she came to me with was she identified a lot of blind spots that I had that I didn't realize things that I was doing. And it made me totally focus on how to become that better husband, that better father, ultimately better friend, better business associate, etc. So evaluate, vision, evaluate, third areas to train. What I mean by this is prepare for the tasks that you're going forward with. Choose to associate with those whom you want to emulate. Find mentors, individuals you look up to, and ask them questions about what has made them a success. You know, it could be as a spouse, as a friend, you know, holistically as well as at work. And then anything that fits in within your physical capability, your character, or your personality, employ those things. But not everything that made them a success will necessarily translate to you into your world or your life. The thing you have to remember about this is that no matter what age you are, no matter what your experience level is, you must always, always be in a personal growth mode or you decline. Life is never stagnant. You know, I can remember growing up, I grew up on a farm in Iowa. The farm has been in our family for over 125 years. I can remember listening to stories from my father, my grandfather, about the legacy of that rich family agricultural tradition in the east central part of the state of Iowa, where I'm from. You know, I learned from them how to drive the heavy machinery, which I probably translated from me being able to fly jets. You know, I learned a lot of those important core value lessons through my father and my grandfather. Then when I got to the Air Force Academy, I can remember listening to stories of some of my sponsors who were fighter pilots during the Vietnam era, and listening to these guys tell these stories about their big kills over northern Vietnam. Inspirational. I mean, it motivated me to, I wanted to hop in that cockpit right away and get after it. Then when I came to the Ex-Cowboys, one of the guys I sought out and talked with at length was Randy White. You know, all-pro defensive tackle, Hall of Fame player. You know, everything that I could question, I could ask how he trained, supplements that he took, pass rush moves. But not everything that made him a success would translate for me. Randy's a black belt martial arts. I'm an Iowa farm boy. I wrestled pigs. You know? But everything that I could learn from him, I did to get to that point where I could be that holistic player on the field. Evaluate, training, vision. The fourth area is to plan. Plan your work and work your plan. I'm sure if anybody's been in sales has employed that concept. You know, think about what your needs are going to be, and periodically follow through and see if you're hitting those metrics or those bogeys. It means, from a military standpoint, how do you think strategically, long-term, tactically, short-term? Another story I think exemplifies this is a story told about a man who, I remember shortly before quitting time, at the end of the day that he had a late night meeting to attend. And he tried in vain to reach all his carpool members, and he finally just gave up, and he wrote a note and put it on each of their desks, and basically said, hey, go ahead and leave without me. I got a late night meeting, and he signed his name Dave. Well, when Dave came back to his desk about 7:30, 8 o'clock that night, there was a note on his desk that said, Dear Dave, meet us at the bar and grill across the street. You drove, you idiot. Gotta have situational awareness too, right? The other side of the trees is by the forest. Another great lesson that I learned when flying jets in the Air Force was just about that aspect of planning. As a flight leader, we would brief our missions. We'd come 2 hours before our step time, and I would brief every contingency that I could think of. Call signs, what frequency you're going to utilize, what the weather at our home base as well as the target area is going to be, what the terrain is going to be like, what munitions we are going to carry on board, what targets we're going to go after, what defensive assets the enemy had that can hurt us, what happens if one of us has a mechanical malfunction, where are the divert bases, what happens if one of us, if not both of us, gets shot down, where the parsons were going to be, what was our escape and evasion plan, checking all your life survival equipment that you flew with. I mean, we would brief everything to the nth degree. Hop in the jets, take off, we go to an IP point. We fly to a virtual point anywhere from 8 to 10 nautical miles away from our intended target area. I'd set up in a Normandy pattern. My wingman would be in a line position, flying about 1,000-foot wingtip abreast of myself. We're flying anywhere from 500 to 1,000 feet. A-10, for those of you who don't know an A-10, A-10 is probably the ugliest aircraft in the Air Force inventory. The whole plane was designed around a 30-millimeter Gatling gun called a Gatling Avenger. It just sounds cool. Avenger, right? This thing was designed to kill tanks. It shot depleted uranium tip, high explosive incendiary, 30-millimeter. Bolts are this big, 4,000 rounds a minute. I squeeze the trigger for a second. That's 100 rounds of depleted uranium coming out. I can penetrate over 2.5 inches of armor on a tank from over 15,000 feet away, 3 miles away, and kill it with just my gun. Anybody here got goosebumps? I do. was slow. It was high level. But we'd set up on this orbital pattern. I get my waiting position. I get on the radio and I talk to a forward air controller or an air liaison officer, guy in the air, guy in the ground, and he'd give me a 5-line brief. This is where the fun begins. I get a grease pencil out of my G suit, and I'm writing on my canopy. He'd give me a brief, so it's like this. He'd give me a set of coordinates, whatever they might be. He says, okay, 327 degrees, 7.2 nautical miles, convoy of tanks, Soviet SA-6 battery, which was a defensive asset, 3 fingers of death, the surface there, missile battery, bad news if those are in the area. That's at 342 degrees for 6.2 nautical miles, egress Bravo. I'd write that down. I say, okay, now the game plan. I reach my other G suit pocket and I pull out a laminated map. I lay that laminated map on my leg board, reach my other G suit pocket, and I get out a compass. And those coordinates that I gave you, I go heads down and I would plot those coordinates with that vector where he's going, and that circle, that's where the bad guys are at. So just think about this. I'm flying at 500 feet, going about 320 knots. I don't have an autopilot. It's just me, myself, and I are in the cockpit. If I'm distracted for 10 to 15 seconds, Joe will help me on this too. I go 10 to 15 degrees nose low, what's going to happen? Bang, right? And there's no reset button. So a little bit of multitasking. And maybe sometimes you say, man, cannot multitask. It's because we choose not to. It's only when it's cool, when it's something really cool. So I plot these points. That's where it is. Okay, at this point in time, I go, okay, one's ready to do your turn. And while he's heads down, I'm flying. I'm making sure there's no bad guys in the area. I'm making sure he's where he's supposed to be, and I'm making sure where I'm supposed to be, and I memorize my ingress route. Because when we depart that IP point, going inbound to that target area, I didn't have a GPS. I mean, this is seat of the pants flying. So I'm sitting there memorizing, okay, I'm gonna, at the 2-minute mark, I'm crossing this road intersection. At the 3.5-minute mark, there's a power line that crosses a railroad bridge. And at the 5.5-minute point, there's a small hill with a tower on top. That's where I'm gonna pop up and the enemy's right behind me. Okay, good enough. 2 reports back in, 2's ready, now it's your turn. Or 2's ready to go. I said, okay, think. Basically, I got to call an audible, football terminology. Everything that we briefed in that pre-flight mission brief, the whole tactical situation changed. I give him something like this: combat trail, shooter bomber, drop up. And he understood that we're not going to depart that fix, that IP point. We're at 500 feet, we're going down to 100 feet. We're going to get firewall, go as fast as we can get going inbound. He's going to be behind me, looking through me to the target area in the combat trail position. I'm going to be the shooter. When I get to that hill with that tower on top, I'm popping up. So I'm pulling about 20 degrees nose high. I'm going up, and again, I can't expose myself for more than 15 to 20 seconds, because that's how long it's going to take that SA-6 battery to find me and try to shoot me down. So I'm popping up, and I'm looking. Tanks are right there. I'm rolling in, I'm taking that Gatling gun. Being a shooter, the enemy's going to put his heads down. I'm diving back down the weeds. My wingman would extend. He'd pop up. I'd talk his eyes onto the target. He'd expend the heavy ordnance. Take out the target. He'd dive back down. We go to the other IP Bravo point, and we do it again and again and again. And we live by the code that the flexibility is the key to air power. But that's true about life. We all have to be flexible. We have our vision. We know who we are. And that leads me to my final stage. To execute, it's game day. You've done everything you can at this point in time to put yourself in a position of success. You have a vision. You know who you are from a character standpoint. You know internally what are your strengths and what are your weaknesses. You're working on both. You've been mentored. You have a proper plan in place. Now what's all that's left? Time to get out there and get after it. And just execute the game plan. One of the things that after that point, I never really knew I had what it took. As a football player, as a fighter pilot. As a fighter pilot till I flew my first mission. As a football player till I ran down the field and I took that first hit, or I gave that first hit. Up until that point, it was all practice, it was all theory. At some point in time, you gotta get in the game. You gotta get after it. But in that same token, we weren't created to be Rambos. Or for your older school guys like myself, we weren't created to John Wayne to be, or Gary Cooper at high end and standing alone. We're created for relationships. And the best thing about relationships is that we were created as a team. You've all heard the aspects of team, that there's no I in team or feet across it for team. TEAM, together, everyone achieves more. More can be accomplished through teamwork than can be accomplished by any individual. It's a biblical principle that if one can send 1,000 to flight, two can send 10,000. Same thing as a fighter pilot. If I didn't take care of my wingman didn't take care of me, the likelihood of us accomplishing our mission goes way down. The likelihood of something bad happening to us goes way up. Same thing in athletics, particularly football. You're never going to reach a Super Bowl by being a group of individuals. I'd rather have a whole team of no-names and a whole team of superstars who are only concerned about one thing, that's padding individual statistics to make that next contract. When members of the team are more concerned about accomplishing the team goals, the likelihood of racking up those victories goes way up. But the thing about that too is that everybody has to be on the same page. It kind of fits along with the Chinese proverb that says that everybody in the same boat should help each other, right? Because success is not a sometimes thing. Everybody on the team must, from a cultural perspective, must be singing off the same page of music. If what you want to pursue does not fit the goals, the culture of that team, just don't do it. Look back at the Cowboys. 3 of my first 4 years in the NFL were Super Bowl championship victories. But that rapid rise to success ultimately paid a price. As I said, I think it's more difficult to maintain that level of success than it is to climb that ladder. And why is that? We had individuals that, on the field, we worked like an intricately made Swiss clock. Everybody was on time to meetings, everybody did what was asked of them on the practice field, the weight room, the training room. But it was those off-the-field antics and behaviors that eventually led to the downfall of that dynasty. And again, success is not a sometimes thing. If what you're doing does not jive with what the cultural aspect is of that team, you can't do it, because you'll never sustain. Culture is important, and everybody's got to buy into your culture. Now, leadership aspects too. We all have to be committed as leaders, because I firmly believe that each and every one of us are leaders. Leadership is a choice. There's a story told about the lion. What is the lion known for? Being king of the jungle, right? Well, he was so confident of his abilities as being king of the jungle that he bypassed all the small animals and he went on to all the large animals. The first animal he went up to was the bear. And he asked the bear, "Bear, who's king of the jungle?" And that bear cowered away and he said, "Well, why, you are a mighty lion. You're king of the jungle." Ooh, that's right, I'm king of the jungle. The whole ground just shook with his mighty roar. He went up to the tiger next. He said, "Tiger, who's king of the jungle?" That tiger, he cowered away too. He says, "Why, you are a mighty lion. You're king of the jungle." Ooh, that's right. I'm king of the jungle. Well, finally he went up to the elephant. And he asked the elephant, "Elephant, who's king of the jungle?" Well, that elephant picked up that lion in his trunk and spun him around a couple times, took him up to a nearby tree, banged his head against a tree, took him up to a nearby lake, got him in the lake and finally threw him up on the beach. Well, when that lion came to, he looked up at that elephant with bloody, battered, and bruised eyes. He said, "Look, just because you don't know the answer doesn't mean you have to get mean about it." Again, I believe everybody's called to be a leader in some capacity, even if it's like my teenage son, just to make personal hygiene decisions as to bathing. It's a leadership decision. Right? Leadership has many facets. Warren Bennis has put it best this way when he said, quote, that leaders are people who do the right thing. Managers are people who do things right. Both roles are crucial. But I often observe people in top positions doing the wrong thing well. Think about that, unquote. Before you can lead, you got to learn how to follow. You got to know the role in which you're to fit. I often observe it's difficult when there are too many chiefs in the TP and not enough warriors. You probably all have had that experience before. There's always going to be folks around you that are going to count on your leadership. And again, leadership is setting the example, setting the vision. But more importantly, aspects when you do set that example, what does that look like? David Cooper, in his book Psychiatry and Anti-Psychiatry, he said that, quote, perhaps the most central characteristic to authentic leadership is the relinquishing of the impulse to dominate others. Therefore, it's said that a boss creates fear. A leader creates confidence. Bossism creates resentment. Leadership breeds enthusiasm. A boss says I, and a leader says we. A boss fixes blame, and a leader fixes mistakes. A boss knows how, and a leader shows how. Bossism makes work drudgery. Leadership makes work interesting. A boss relies on authority, and a leader relies on cooperation. A boss drives, and a leader leads. And again, to me, leadership is a choice. You have a choice. What type of, if you're in a leadership position, are you a boss or are you a leader? And again, I've experienced all kinds of leadership styles, both in the military as well as the football field. In the military, I've had those squadron commanders that I followed in combat anytime, any place, just name the place. Also had those guys that are lucky they get shot in the back. Same thing on the football field with coaches. I've had those coaches that can motivate me to play that extra play, play that extra series, when I didn't think I had anything left in me. Same token, I've had those guys that couldn't motivate a guy dying from dehydration to take a drink of water. And I want to challenge you today. You know, commitment and leadership are both essential to success, but how do you define success? Is it monetarily? Is it social status? Is it prestige? In my opinion, it's true success and leadership are not defined by those things. It's defined by balance. As I alluded to in the early part of my speech, when I came to the point in my life where I asked myself that question, excuse me, when I really took a long, deep look into myself, I had an epiphany. I realized that many times I was constantly striving to accomplish things that got my balance out of whack. And I came up with this philosophy that I'll share with you in closing, that this is my measurement, metrics of success. It's balance. It's maintaining a balance between 4 areas of your life. One aspect is a physical aspect. Dieting, exercise, taking care of yourself physically. Another aspect is a mental aspect. Leaders are readers. We should all strive to learn something new about the world around us each and every day. And that process does not stop after college, after any mandatory continuing education units, whatever. After retirement, it's a lifelong pursuit. Physical, mental, fourth area is family. We need to establish and maintain those relationships with our spouse, our kids, grandkids, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. Because it is that social, cultural unit that you fall back on when things hit the fan, when things don't necessarily go right. Again, think about it from a relationship standpoint. Physical, mental, family, fourth area is community. We need to get back. I alluded to the aspect of a proponent for mentorship. I think a lot of the cultural woes that we are currently experiencing can be overcome through mentorship. It's taking the time to talk with someone, to share with someone about life's experience, just to show someone that you care. And by not letting any of those 4 areas become dominant. For example, when I was playing for the Cowboys 20 years ago, I couldn't spend all my time at Valley Ranch lifting weights, exercising, neglect my family at home. Same token, I couldn't spend all my time at home playing with my kids and neglect opportunities as this to give back. It is a balance. But the thing is, my balance defined by me is different than your balance defined by you. You have to determine that. And how you determine that, ultimately I alluded earlier about what is your why, what is your vision, what is your perception of reality, what is the filter in which you process your experiences. Some people say it's a character, but I'm going to say, what do you hold sacred? And ultimately, for me, it's your religious values. For me, I'm a Christian. That's the filter, that's the mechanism in which I view, but that is a personal decision that you have to make, and you will make that, whether consciously or unconsciously. What do you hold sacred? Because that's the filter in which you process your life. So, in closing, my balance is defined by my faith, by my family, by my country, by myself. Faith, family, country, self. Have a great afternoon. It's been a joy. Appreciate you very much, Adam. Take it over.